But I find it strange that the motion is coined in such a way that this House fears the return of a man who did more than any other in at least 2 generations to revivify that civilization, to stand up for concepts of representative government and national sovereignty and the greatness of our civilization. Thank you, Madam President, Madam Secretary, the committee, and all in attendance today who made this possible, and I'm very excited to see such a full House this evening. The motion before us that we are arguing against is that this House fears the return of the man I worked for, Donald John Trump. I'm honored to be in this building, at this society, which has recognized and invited such champions in Western civilization, who believed in the truth, who believed in the will of the people and Western civilization, as Einstein, as Reagan, and as Thatcher. But I find it strange that the motion is coined in such a way that this House fears the return of a man who did more than any other in at least 2 generations to revivify that civilization, to stand up for concepts of representative government and national sovereignty and the greatness of our civilization. The most important speech he ever gave was at the Warsaw Ghetto, the site of the uprising against fascism. And he asked one question, which is the question of the age. Does the West, do we together, have what it takes to defend and defeat those who wish to destroy our civilization? And that is why I served him. I was on my friend Carl Benjamin's show today, and he said, well, the question is interesting because maybe the people in this room, maybe the people at this college do fear him, but for the wrong reasons. Why would you not wish to have a man back who is the only person in history to have received more than 130 million votes? No other human being has received 130 million votes. Do the math. 64 and said, no, please, we have decorum here or we have nothing. Why would you wish to have others decide for you who should run a country? Should it not be the people who decide who runs a country? No, I'm good, thank you. That is why Donald Trump was elected in 2016. I find it rather risible, amusing at least, that as an immigrant to the United States, I have to remind my fellow Americans what they did in 2016. Because there is a connective tissue between every president, from Washington to Obama. There is a similarity. Every single one of them was a member of the political and military elite. From Washington to Obama, they were all congressmen, senators, governors, or retired generals. And then, what did the American people do? They said, enough, enough of these people. We want somebody who is untainted by being a member of the quote-unquote elite. Quote, no, I'm good, thank you. So, let me flip the perspective. And don't get me wrong, I grew up here. I went to Ealing Abbey for 14 years. I was in the debate club. When I first met this man in 2015, it took some getting used to. When I was invited to Trump Tower to advise him during the Republican debate on national security, I thought, really? That guy from television? Him? He wants me to advise him? But it was not a hard decision. Why? Because within 30 seconds of meeting the man, I knew 2 things about him. He loved America, and he had an utter detestation for political correctness. For me, that was enough. And in classic Trump style, In classic Trump style, there's only me and him in Trump Tower and his campaign manager, Corey, in the corner. Halfway through the discussion, he stopped it dead, turned to Corey, and he said, I like this guy, let's hire him. And me and Stormy Daniels are connected because I also signed an NDA. Let's have some fun as well. Let's save the West, but have some fun. So let me flip the motion thusly. There are those who should fear the return of my former boss. Absolutely. Who are these people? Let me give you a short list. Number one, ISIS, jihadis, the people who 5 weeks ago effected the greatest slaughter of the Jewish people since the Shoah, since the Holocaust. They will fear President Trump. Why? Because when we came into the White House, I'm good, thank you. When we came into the White House, we had been lectured by Barack that ISIS is, quote, just a problem we have to get used to. We said, no thanks. And he unleashed the might of the US military. And within 6 months, the physical caliphate ceased to be like a certain parrot. I'm good, thank you. The jihadis fear his return. So too do the murderous mullahs in Iran. The proudest moment of my time in the White House was when the buzzer rang and he called me and Steve Bannon into the Oval to see the cabinet arrayed before us. He called us his heavies and he said, all right, my heavies, tell these guys why we kill Obama's Iran deal. And we explained why for Israel, for the West, for the stability of the geopolitical order, the Iranian state must not be funded and acquire nuclear weapons. And he killed the deal. Iran fears the return of Donald Trump. And so do the cartels. So does Vladimir Putin. I love how everybody's an expert. I love how everybody's an expert suddenly on the Wagner Group. Can I tell you about the Wagner Group? We knew a lot about them when we were in the White House because we told the president, this is all unclassified now, you can check it up, that there are 300 Russian mercenaries running around the Middle East. I'm good, thank you. And I will be for the next 4 minutes. When we told him that there are 300 mercenaries running around the Middle East destabilizing that region, what did my boss do? He said, kill them now. And we did. In a 4-hour firefight, we turned 300 Russians into red mist. And what did that diminutive KGB colonel in the Kremlin do? Nothing. Because he wet his pants. Because he's afraid of my bust. As is the little man in the Hermit Kingdom. I'm so glad you pointed about the little button and big button tweet. Because that's how you deal with dictators. You say, yeah, I'm going to turn you into a sheet of glass, Pyongyang. And what happened? Oh, how interesting. No more ballistic missile launches over the Sea of Japan. A peace summit in Singapore. Yes, that's how you deal with dictators. Lastly, we've been talking about my sphere of interest, national security. Let's look inward for a minute. The most cynical and, in fact, evil aspect of the last 3 years is what they've done to the sovereignty of our nation. You think a few hundred boat people are an issue. In the last 3 years, 8 million illegals have come into our country. Left-wing organizations like the UNHCR, like Human Rights Watch, have stated on the record up to 60% of the women and girls trafficked across the border have been raped. If you think that's funny, look in your soul, young man, if you think that's funny. Yes, hide. Young girls raped. with such cynicism and such racism. Why? Because they think if you're brown, if you're black, and we amnesty you, you will vote for us forever. Don't forget who Biden is. Biden is the chairman of the Senate committee who effected the high-tech lynching, quote, of Clarence Thomas, a man who deigned to be a black conservative. That's the bigotry of the current incumbent in the White House. Lastly, I will share with you a story about who this man is and why we need him back. For 23 years, every president, from Clinton through Bush to Obama, broke a promise to the world. We had told Israel that we would move the embassy to Jerusalem and recognize that capital. For 23 years, every president on both sides of the aisle reneged on that promise. President Trump said during his campaign, we're going to do it. When he finally called the National Security Council at principals level, not the bureaucrats, the cabinet members, he informed the cabinet members, I'm doing it now. Only 3 people who worked for him in the cabinet concurred. One of them, and for me this pains me because I spent 2.5 years at Quantico teaching the Marines. I love our devil dogs. The so-called Mad Dog Mattis of the Marine Corps said in front of the cabinet, sir, don't do that. Don't move the embassy. Don't recognize Jerusalem. You will trigger World War III. And I don't have enough Marines to defend our embassies. What did the commander-in-chief say to them? He said, Jim, we are doing it. Why? Because I promised the American people, number one. Number two, we as a nation 23 years ago promised the only democracy in the Middle East that we would do it. Oh, and lastly, Jim, it's the right thing to do. That is why we need him back, because to quote the Marines, when we were in the White House, our friends felt safe and our enemies were afraid. Thank you.